Today's shiur begins 3 lines from the bottom of Daf Zayin Omid Aleph. The Gemara opens with a quote from the end of the Mishnah on Daf Beis Omid Aleph. A person had declared Menude Ani Loch. Rabbi Akiva hoyachoichech bozel lahachmir. Rabbi Akiva was inclined to be restrictive, to accept it as a neder, as a vow. Now, in general, the word menuda or the word nidui in other contexts has to do with a form of excommunication, where a person who is in nidui, he's excommunicated, so he is not to participate in, we'll say, daily interaction with people. That's a very, very general statement. The Gemara here will be interested in some variations on that word or idea and what effects it has. Before we get into our Gemara, though, I think we'll go back to Daf Beis Omid Aleph and simply read the Rashi that you will find over there. And Rashi there on Beis Omid Aleph, at the beginning, toward the end of the Mishnah, comments Menuda Ani Loch, a person who says that Kamo she'im hoya banidui de osur lei lisa v'litein bahadei, just like a person who is in formal excommunication, it would be forbidden to do business with him. Kach osar nafshei olei. So too, when someone regarding himself says Menude Ani Loch, I am Menude to you, that would be, in effect, he is forbidding the friend to benefit from him, from the speaker. So now, regarding that language, Menude Ani Loch, does that actually create a vow, namely a state of prohibition? So Rabbi Akiva was inclined to be machmir, to say yes, it does impose a state of prohibition. However, it's not 100% clear to Rabbi Akiva that is the meaning. The Gemara, 3 lines from the bottom of Zayin Omid Aleph, Menuda Ani Loch v'chulei, Omar Abaye, Moide Rabbi Akiva le'inyan Malkus. Rabbi Akiva will concede that with regard to one who violates this vow, and the result would have been lashings, she'eno loke. In this case, there will be no lashings. The im kain, if Rabbi Akiva held that it's a full-fledged vow, the violation of which imposes a lashing punishment, nisni, then the text of the Mishnah should have read, Rabbi Akiva machmir. Rabbi Akiva is stringent, is strict with regard to that, but that's not the language. The lashon of the Mishnah was choichech bozel achmir, which means he is inclined to be restrictive. Now, as we go on in the Gemara, you notice a new geometric form, a house shape. On the side of the Gemara, under our nosei mivneh heading, a house appears, and we've written machloikis Rav Papa v'Rav Chisda be'eze loshen hoya hamachloikis Rabbi Akiva v'chachamim. There is a machlokis between Rabbi Akiva and the Chachamim. In our Mishnah, Rabbi Akiva's name appeared in the context of Menuda Ani Loch, where he was inclined to be machmir. Apparently, there is another opinion that disagrees with Rabbi Akiva. So the question is, regarding what language, what expression is there a point of disagreement? So Rav Papa appears here in a house form, and on Omid Beis, 5 lines from the top, you can see in our marked Gemaras, he says that the expression concerning which there's a machlokis Rabbi Akiva and the Chachamim is mishamtena. According to Rav Papa, mishamtena is not a point of machlokis. Now, as we said at the beginning of our Masechta, while we learn Maseches Nedarim, there are phrases, there are words, terms that are characteristic of this Masechta that are difficult to translate in a standard, let's say, literal or translation form, and we'll look through from time to time at the Meforshim to get a feeling of what the words mean. So now we continue with the Gemara, second line from the bottom of Zayin Omed Aleph, Omar Rav Papa, Be Nadina Minoch, De Kule Almo Lo Pligi De Ozer. If a person were to say that, everyone would agree, even the Chachamim would agree, that that constitutes a vow. If we look at Rashi, 3 lines from the end, Nadina Mimoch, the Mashma Beferush, that is an explicit statement. Ehei minude loch. I am considered minude. We said before, excommunication, an expression of prohibition. I am prohibited to you. Dahainu vadai l'kulei alma aser. There, everyone agrees that that is definitely a prohibition. The rush, the lower part of the narrow lines, benadina mimach, the kliyama asur, the mashma misnoideid ani. Misnoideid means to drift away. Umuvdal mimcha, and separated from you. V'havei tfei mi meruchakani mimcha aliba deshmuel. This expression of nadina is even more of a distancing expression than the expression of meruchakani. V'ha detana lo moni lahu hadei yodos masisin, that which this does not appear amongst the yodos of the Mishnah. Ikol meimar tana v'shir v'od yodos tuva ika delo tana. The Tana is not giving the exhaustive list of yodos, but this would have been considered an example of a yad, as an example of a partial expression of prohibition, of vowing. So now we continue with one more commentary, and we notice in the Tosfos commentary, you'll notice very close to the end of the Tosfos commentary, 2-3 lines from the end of the page. Nadino minoch kuleamot lo pligi da'aser pirush mishum delosha no v'nodhu. It's a language of moving away, of distancing. In kain moyel shapir beloy shani oicholoch. This language of nadino is very clear, even without adding the expression of shani ocheloch, which we discussed in our previous shiur. This alone is clear. V'shapir havi yodai mochichos tfei mimudrani mimcha. This is a clear partial language than mudrani mimcha. Dein l'safkoi ba'archokas dalanamos. As opposed to mudrani mimcha, here we don't doubt or raise the possibility that all the guy is saying is I'm moving 4 amas away from you. Mishum deloshen nadino lo mashma kalshen harchoka lo mashma shani no v'nod milahanos mimcha. The explanation of this language is that I am moving away from you, from benefiting from you. So that is a loshon, an expression of a vow. So Rav Papa says that nadina, everyone agrees, is a binding vow of prohibition. The Gemara continues, Mishamtina minoch l'kulei alma shori. This word, Mishamtina, everyone will agree, does not indicate prohibition. We look again at the commentaries, we look at the Tosfos where we left off, second line from the very end, Mishamtina kulei alma lo pligi deshori, deloshen klolohu. Mishamtina is a language of curse, kamo miklani mimcha, there is no implied expression of prohibition of benefit here. The Rush also comments on this, second line from the bottom, Mishamtana l'kuleam l'shori, the Loshon Shamta hu, v'lo yad l'neder. Shamta means it's an expression of excommunication, and it's not a partial language of vow prohibition. Avol nadina mashma no dare, v'lo lashon nidui. The nadina expression that we discussed before, that implies vowing of prohibition and not an expression of excommunication. So far, we're explaining nadina, everyone agrees, is a expression of vow, of prohibition. Mishamtana is not. B'mai pligi. So then, what is the point of machlokes between Rabbi Akiva and the Rabbanan? B'menude aniloch. That is the expression that we saw in the Mishnah. The Rabbi Akiva Savar, here we're at the top of Omid Beis. The Rabbi Akiva Savar, Lishna de Niduyahu. Rabbi Akiva holds it's an expression of Niduya. And Rabbana Safri, Lishna de Mishamtinahu. And we just saw before that Mishamtina is an expression of klola, but not a lashon, not an expression of prohibition. So that when Rabbi Akiva says that the lashon of menude is a lishna deniduyahu, we're going to explain within the context that it's like nadina. As we are recording this year, I just noticed that in the Tosfos he has that girsa of nadina, which we saw before is an accepted language of vow, of prohibition. We continue in the Gemara on the third line from the top of Omid Beis, Upliga de Rav Chisda. Rav Papa's approach is at odds or different than that of Rav Chisda. Tahu Gavro Diomar Mishamtena Benichse Debrei de Rav Yirmiyah Bar Abba. There was a person that said that I am Mishamtena with regard to the properties of the son of Rav Yirmiyah. Also Lekame de Rav Chisda. The case came to Rav Chisda. Amalei Leis de Chosh La Laha de Rabbi Akiva. No one takes into consideration in rendering the halacha like Rabbi Akiva. So that as far as Rav Chisda is concerned, Mishamtana is a point of machlokes, where Rabbi Akiva says it is restrictive. And Rav Chisda says no one takes that into consideration, and hence the person would be allowed to benefit from those properties. Well, if Rav Chisda is saying that Rabbi Akiva views Mishamtana with restriction, that's not what Rav Papa said. Rav Papa said that Mishamtana, everyone, including Rabbi Akiva, agrees is non-restrictive altogether. So, Kosovar, this shows us that Rav Chisda holds the Mishamtana pligi, that Mishamtana was the point of controversy. If the structure is not 100% clear, then take a look at the arrow that you see here, and at this point we've dashed underline Mishamtana and squiggle underline pligi. Compare this with Omid Aleph, where you see Mishamtana is dashed underlined under Rav Papa, and it said there that regarding Mishamtana, everyone agrees it's mutter. As you can see, we have a slash mark in the Gemara, indicating that which follows is a new trend of thought. On the side of the Gemara, you can see we've indicated a mivneh, a structural note, and a triangle is featured. This highlights halachos shel Rav. These are rulings of Rav. Triangles that are numbered 1 through 3, halachos shel Rav, hakshuros lenidui. These are 3 halachas that are related to the topic of excommunication. And now here we're dealing with formal excommunication as opposed to the Gemara before, where the question was, what happens if a person uses the lashon of menudeh in the context of making a vow? But here we're dealing with a person that is excommunicated and how to proceed forward. Omar Rabbi Ila, Omar Rav, Niduhu Befonov, a person who was formally excommunicated, and the excommunication was issued in his presence. Ein matirin lo ela Befonov. It cannot be undone unless he is present. Niduhu shelo Befonov, if a person was excommunicated but from a distance, meaning the guilty party wasn't present when the rabbi who excommunicated him was issued that ruling. So matirin lo bein befonov bein shelo befonov. The release of the individual from the excommunication can be done whether he is present or even if not. Omar Rav Chonin Omar Rav Hashomea Haskoras Hashem Mipi Chavero Tzorich Linadoso. If one is a witness, a listener, he hears someone uttering the name of the Almighty for naught, called Moitzi Shem Shembayim Levatola. So, as you as a listener have to excommunicate the offender. Vimlo Nidu, and if you didn't take the action of excommunicating the offender, Hu Atzmo Yehe Benidui, then you as a listener deserve to be excommunicated. There's a point in the Rosh. You might notice we have a star in the wide lines of the Rosh commentary, and there we've noted Vimlo Nidu Hu Atzmo Yehe Benidui Pirush Roi Lisnados. He deserves to be put into excommunication. The Gemara elaborates, Shekol Mokoim Shahazkoras Hashem Mitzuya Shom Anius Mitzuya Va'anius Kamisa. Wherever the name of the Almighty is uttered for naught, there you will find poverty. In other words, that what results from the pointless recitation of the Almighty's name, the result of that is poverty. And poverty is like death. Where do we know that poverty is like death? Shneimar, there is a pasuk concerning Dosan and Aviram. These are people that were antagonists toward Moshe Rabbeinu, and Moshe Rabbeinu was told that the people that were antagonizing you are dead. Ki mesu kol ha'anoshim v'tanya. And we have to just point out that when that pasuk says that they are dead, they actually were not physically dead, but they had become impoverished. V'tanya kol mokom shenosu chachomim eineim oimisa oini. Wherever the chachomim, now literally means they placed their eyes, but it's wherever they issued, we'll say, an excommunication. So what follows from that is either death or poverty. Let's go over some of the points that we see in the Meforshim on this section of Gemara. The Rashi says, a little more than halfway down the short Rashi column, Kol mokom shenosachom meineim la'odom shenidu, regarding a person that the chachomim, that the sages excommunicated, omeiso nofabanius v'achi tzorich lenadoso. The reason, and this is the reason that we have to excommunicate someone who utters the name of Hashem for naught, kedei shipol banius, so that he should become impoverished. Tahainu kamisa. That's like a death penalty. So it's true that uttering the name of Hashem is a serious offense, but there is no court-ordained death penalty for that. Nevertheless, he is deserving of death, and in order to accomplish that, we will excommunicate him, which leads to impoverishment, which, as we demonstrated before, is tantamount to death. There's another comment that we want to look at together in the Rosh. The Rosh is found in the wide lines, about the 7th, 8th wide line. Shekol mokum shaskos Hashem mitzuya shamanius mitzuya. Wherever the mention of God's name for naught is made, there you will find poverty. This pasuk says that wherever I give permission for my name to be mentioned, for example, in the context of brachos, in the context of the priestly benediction, it says there will be bracha, I will bless you. Bracha hainu osher. Bracha is a term that means plenty. It means abundance, wealth. Dechtiv uberachecha b'chol mas yadecha u'minazkoras mitzvah ma'asheres. We can then infer from the positive to the negative, from the fact that the positive mentioning of Hashem's name leads to enrichment, leaving us to conclude that sinful mentioning of Hashem's name results in impoverishment. There's another comment that you see in the Rosh, just a few lines later. The Tanya Shmuel Omer Omar Komokim Shosachomim Omiso Oini. In our Gemara text, we don't have that introduction of Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, but there are alternative texts that do include that. And the Rosh comments, Umaisi Oiraya Sha'ini Shokol Kamisa. Another proof is brought over here that Oni, that impoverishment is equal to death. It's mentioned in a number of places. Nosan Einov Boy V'nasegal Shelat Somas. You find that as a rabbinic expression. He cast his eyes upon him and he became a heap of bones. And that's a reference to Oni. He became impoverished. Beperek Bamed Madlikin, HaRav Ozer Beno, Kshotsu Min Amora, Komok Kshotsu Eineim, Bohoya Nisraf. You see in the Gemara and Shabbos also this idea of everything that they gazed upon in displeasure immediately was burnt. Let's turn back to the Gemara. Omar, we're at the last narrow line. Omar Rabbi Abba have a ki'imno kameid Rav Huna. Rabbi Abba says, I was standing in the presence of Rav Huna. Shomalach itzah da'afka askos Hashem levatola. And a woman was heard mentioning the name of the Almighty for naught. Shamto v'shola la'alter ba'apo. Rav Huna excommunicated her and then immediately released her from the excommunication in her presence. Shmami notlas. From this incident, 3 halachic conclusions can be reached. Number 1, Shmami no Hashem askos Hashem mipi chavero tzorch l'nadoso. That one who hears the unnecessary utterance of God's name, the listener, the one who hears it, must excommunicate the offender. Ushmami no nido b'fonov ein matir lo elo b'fonov. When the excommunication is done in the presence of the offender, the release from that nidui, from that excommunication, must be done only in the presence of the offender. Ushmami no ein bein nidui lahafora v'lo klum. And a third conclusion is that the amount of time between the nidui and its hafora, and its reversal, its undoing, can be of minimal time, meaning it can be immediate, as we saw in the story. So these 3 points one can easily derive from the incident. As you can see, a new marking appears, a crown shape, and on the side of the Gemara under our Mivneh heading, this highlights Halochas Rav Gidl Shemitzatet es Rav. Rav Gidl will be citing Rav be'inyonei Talmidei Chachomim, Mitzvos v'Talmud Torah. Comments that have to do with Torah scholars, with mitzvos, and with the study of Torah. We continue then with the series of Rav comments. This is the 3rd Rav comment. Omar Rav Gidl, Omar Rav. Talmud Chacham menade li'atzmoi u'meifer li'atzmo. As far as the understanding of this halacha of Talmud Chacham menade li'atzmo, meifer li'atzmo, the Ran presents a couple of different opinions on this. We will translate it for the time being, the Gemara, and that is that a Talmud Chacham can impose upon himself excommunication and can then release himself from that state. The Gemara says, Pshita, is that not obvious? The Ran points out that some don't even include this girsa of Pshita, but assuming for the time being that the Gemara's girsa is as it is, if you put yourself into excommunication, then certainly you should be able to release yourself from it. So is that not obvious? The Gemara says it's not so obvious. Mahu detema ein chovush matir atzmo mibeisu asurin. The literally, this phrase means one who is incarcerated cannot release himself from imprisonment. There is a halacha that if a person made a vow, if he took an oath, he made a vow regarding something. In fact, one cannot undo one's own vows. Someone else has to, a Beis Din or a Talmud Chacham has to undo your vow. You can't do it yourself. So there is precedent for thinking otherwise. So I might have thought that regarding nidui as well, if a Talmud Chacham imposed nidui upon himself, maybe he can't release himself. Chomash Malon, so Rav Gidol is telling me, in fact, he is able to do it. Heichi Domi, what is an example of this? Under what circumstances might this arise where a person would put himself, where a Talmud Chacham would put himself into excommunication? Kiha de Marzutra Chasida, as was the case involving Marzutra, the pious one. Ki mechayev bar beirav shamta, if a Torah scholar was in fact guilty of being excommunicated, was deserving of it, and he was the one that needed to issue that ruling. Mishamis nafshe bereisha, he would first put himself into excommunication. V'hodar mishamis bar beirav, and then he would excommunicate that Torah scholar that needed to be subjected to that. We look in the Rosh, 4 lines from the end. Mishamis nafshe v'hodar mishamis sumraponan, the mishum kovid Torah hoya kosher be'einav l'nado. So it was difficult, emotionally difficult for Marzutra to excommunicate a Torah scholar. So out of honor that one bestows to Torah, it was hard for him to do that. The Gemara himself says that it's preferable to issue lashings to an offending Torah scholar than to excommunicate him. And here he was menadeh. And therefore he put himself in the same boat, so to speak, by excommunicating himself. Inami, another explanation of why he did this, if he put himself in excommunication, so he won't be lazy in undoing it, and hence this will hasten the reversal of the excommunication that takes place afterwards. The Tosfos explains that the bottom line, Mishamis nafshe hoya marchik atzmid al amus mechaverov. When he says he put himself into excommunication, it means he would maintain a physical distance of 4 amos from anyone else. We continue in the Gemara with this story of Marzutra Chasida, who, when a Talmud Chacham, when a Tzumra Bonan deserved excommunication, we said Marzutra would excommunicate himself first, and then the Bar Beirav, and when he would get home, Shori Lenafshe, V'hodar Shori Le. He would then undo his own self-imposed nidui, and then undo the one that was imposed on the Torah student. If we look together in the Rosh, Shori Lenafshe, Shali Koshan Shibesu, B'dabra Meilov, V'yavoy Zakai, V'yatir Zakai. It was important for him to first undo, when he got home, to undo his own self-imposed excommunication, so that the members of his household wouldn't be in violation of the rules of excommunication in their communicating with him. The Gemara continues. V'omar Rav Gidol Omar Rav. We continue now at the top of Daf Ches Omar Aleph. Minayin shenishboyin likayim es hamitzvah. From where do we know that one can vow in order to fulfill a mitzvah? The Rosh at the beginning says, Minayin shnishboim l'kayim ha-mitzvah, v'lo yichoshei shemo yovo lidei takolom v'yavor al shvoso. A person can swear to fulfill a particular mitzvah, and we're not worried that he might come to stumble and violate the shvuah. Let us point out that in general, swearing and vowing is something that we highly discourage. And yet here, in this specific instance of vowing to fulfill a mitzvah, we're saying it would be allowed. So from where do we know that? The Gemara continues, Shenemar nishbati v'akaimo lishmor mishpatei tzidkecha. I swear and fulfill your precepts. The Gemara asks, V'halo mushba v'yomed ma'ar sinaihu. How is it that a vow would take hold when he's already pre-bound from the time of the giving of the Torah? Imagine someone swears to put on tefillin. He's already bound by the oath of Sinai, by the collective Jewish people's acceptance of the Torah to put on the tefillin. Let us take a look at the Rosh on this as well. He's already pre-bound to fulfill the mitzvah. And there's a very significant principle that says that when one is already bound, a second oath cannot be superimposed on him. The psukim that deal with the effectiveness of an oath is based on the pasuk Lamar Haitiv, and that indicates a vow over a topic that's otherwise optional. But if it's an issue, if it's a topic that's not optional but rather obligatory, it doesn't conform to the regulations of the Torah concerning shvuos, concerning oaths, and therefore there's no oath here to begin with. So we have to, let's say, refine Rav Gidol's teaching. Ela ha komash malon. Rather, the following is what Rav Gidol Amarav is telling us. Deshori le'liinish lizruze nafshe. It is permissible for a person to increase his diligence, to hasten. Lizuruze is an expression meaning to hasten or increase diligence of individuals with regard to their mitzvah performance. And again, we continue with the Rosh. Elohol kamashmol deshori lizuruze nafshe v'lo have maskir shem shemayim levatola im nishba b'shem. If a person swears to fulfill a mitzvah and he uses the name of the Almighty, even though he's pre-bound, this would not fall into the category of a false or unnecessary use or mention of the Almighty's name. V'nishba below shem nami, and even if he were swearing without the use of God's name, without this Gemara, sakadei techamina, I would have thought the Ozer, it's forbidden to swear, even if it's concerning mitzvah fulfillment, kedei shelo yisragel and mishvus, so that a person should not be accustomed to swearing, and come to swear about other things. Therefore, Rav Gidol Marav says that as an exception to our strict objection to swearing, if you're swearing in the context of mitzvah performance, so you are not in violation of our general objection to swearing. As far as is there an actual oath that sets in over here, it appears quite clear that there isn't any actual oath that sets in because of the principle of mushba v'oymei mehar sinai. He's already pre-bound. Ve'in shvuah chalal shvuah. V'yomer of Gidol Amarav ho'imer ashkim v'eshna perek zeh eshna masechta zu. Person who says, I'm going to get up early and I'm going to learn a particular chapter of Torah, or I'm going to learn a tractate. Neder Godol Nodar Leleike Yisrael. This is a great meaningful, binding vow that has been taken has been made to the Lord of Israel. Let us note the Rosh on the last narrow line. Neder Godal Nodar L'Kisrael Lav Hainu Neder Mamish. This isn't an actual neder in strict neder terms. Taluki Neder Al Shmafis Belvar HaNodur. The technical neder, an actual vow, takes hold only when you impose a prohibition on something based on something else, comparing the current item to something else that had been previously made prohibited. That's not what's happening here. You're not making something prohibited based on something else that had been made forbidden. You're saying you're vowing to get up early and learn a chapter of Torah. So the Rosh says, it's rather compared to someone who vowed to give charity. The Rosh Hashanah, quoting the pasuk Ficha, which we actually saw a few dapim earlier, Zu Tzedakah. And that's in the context, that pasuk is in the general context of vows. So it's like a vow to give charity. The Gemara asks, even so, take note of the fact this question lasts a few lines. How can Rav Yehonasan say that this is a great vow, indicating that it is of a binding nature, and which would indicate that if he doesn't wake up early and study that chapter that he had taken upon himself, he would be in violation. He would be in violation of a vow. But the question is, why would that be? Is he not pre-bound to study Torah anyway? V'ein shvua chala al shvua. Once one is bound by oath to fulfill a precept, a subsequent oath that one takes concerning that matter doesn't take hold. So what else might you say? My kamash malon afilu ziruzi bi'alma. Since we have the principle ein shvua chalal shvua, and we're already bound to the study of Torah, so what is Rav Yehonasan telling me here? That it's allowed, a person is allowed to hasten himself, to increase his diligence through statements like this? Well, Hainu de Rav Gidol Kamaisa, that's what the previous Rav Gidol teaching said. Why do I need that to be repeated? The Gemara answers, Ha Kamashman. The following is what Rav Yehonasan is telling me over here. Kevon di boy potter nafshe b'krishma shachris v'arbis. Since, as far as the precept of Torah study, we said that one is pre-bound. He is bound by oath from Sinai to study Torah. However, how much Torah is one bound when we say bound by Sinai to engage in, we'll say, a minimum of Torah study? One fulfills his basic obligation through the recitation of the morning and nighttime Kriyas Shema. What was the fellow swearing to do over here? He was swearing to learn a tractate or a chapter, something other than Kriyas Shema. So as far as what he is technically speaking, Mushba v'oimed Mahar Sinai, that could have been fulfilled through a lesser amount of Torah study, something as minimal as the actual recitation of Shema, of Shachris and Arvis. And since that is all he would need to do to fulfill his Sinai obligation, when he takes upon himself something extra, Mishum Hachi Chayil Shvuah, because of that, this Shvuah actually takes hold. The Ran has an elaboration on this topic, and he points out that a person shouldn't be, we'll say, so naive as to think that all he has to do in his lifetime is simply recite Kriya Shema of the morning and the evening, and with that he has fulfilled all of our expectations of him concerning Torah learning, because there are additional sources, and the Ran cites them, that one must be fluent in Torah learning, and one can't be fluent in Torah learning if all he knows is Kriya Shema of the morning and the evening. But nevertheless, as far as we'll call basic obligation is concerned, he can fulfill his basic obligation through the Kriya Shema of morning and evening, and therefore there is room for this vow of I'm going to wake up early and study this tractate. There's room for it to take hold. Now we can look together at the Ran. You will see on the 5th line under the Gemara text, it's most likely that's not really all he needs to do to fulfill his Torah obligations, his Torah study obligation. A person is expected to learn day and night according to his abilities, according to his strength. In the first parak of Kedushin it says, Vishinantam, that's the pasuk from Kriya Shema, the words of Torah should be sharp in your mouth. If someone should ask you a question in any area of Torah study, you shouldn't hesitate, but rather answer immediately. The recitation of the morning and evening Kriya Shema is not sufficient to enable a person to reach that level. From here, the Ran proves a principle that he had developed in Maseches Shavuos, the Chomidi Dasa Midrasha, anything that's not explicit in the Torah, but it's derived through drasha, through expounding on verses, even though it is considered a Torah obligation, since it's not explicitly spelled out in the verses, Shvua Chololov, a vow can take effect. So that regarding non-explicit Torah level obligations, the principle of Ein Shvua, Chalal Shvua does not apply. And here, what are we saying? Since with regard to this matter of Torah study, you can fulfill your explicit Torah requirements. What's the explicit Torah requirement? That which you say at the evening and when you arise in the morning. Therefore, with regard to any additional Torah study, though your additional Torah study is Torah obligated, but it's not explicit, therefore there is room for this vow to take hold. And that's what's implied by the expression that Rav Gidol Marav said, that this is a neder gadol. Klomar, it's a big neder. The whole din of, with regard to all the rules that apply to vows, kidvar rishus, as if someone had vowed regarding a matter of option. And there, if one violates such a vow, he's certainly guilty of whatever punishment that needs to be imposed. The Ran says that he developed this idea there in Maseches Shavuos with additional proofs. Now we turn back to the Gemara. Omar of Gidol, Omar Rav. Person says to his friend, let us get up early and study this chapter. A particular chapter of Torah. Olav lahashkim, it is obligatory upon him to get up and do it. She'ne'emar, the pasuk says, Vayomer Elai, kum tzei el habiko v'shoma daber osach, v'o'ei tzei el habiko, and the prophet says that the Almighty had told him to get up and go to the field, and there I, the Almighty, will speak with you. And the prophet said, I went to the field, and there he was. There the presence of the Almighty was already there. To appreciate this sixth teaching of Rav, let's again look into the Ran. The Ran, you can see in the wide lines, toward the second half of the wide lines, Olav lahashkim, it's upon him to get up early. Mistabra li, dachi kamar, it's most likely that this is what is being taught here. Kevan shamar nashkim, harikibulov shehu ma'orer bedover, kishem shu ma'orer me'achshav. He is saying that I'm going to arise, just like I am aroused now. V'tarti kamash, and there are 2 points that are being taught here. Chado de bekabola be'alma l'dvar mitzvah mahanya, that a mere acceptance to do a mitzvah is something that is binding, it's effective. The mai damrina hacha, that which is being said here, lo hiskir lo neder v'lo shvua. Well, he didn't mention a vow or an oath. You see that even without specific mention of the language of a neder or shvua, a formal vow or oath, he's still bound. As we say that if a person expresses an intent to give charity, he is thereby bound. This applies to all mitzvah fulfillment. So that's one point, that with mere verbalizing, mere speech, without additional expressions of oaths and vows, he is bound when it comes to mitzvah fulfillment. Another point is that he has to wake up. He has to wake up early, like we see in the pasuk where the Almighty, so to speak, Kiviyachol was there. The Almighty said, "You get up, and I will speak to you there." And there he was. He fulfilled what he said. So we are to pattern ourselves after the conduct of the Almighty, so to speak. And from here, Rav Gidol learns that he is in fact bound. With that, we conclude our shiur for today.